Hello, welcome to another episode of Executive Suite. I'm your host, Thomas Braun, and today we're here with Neil Smith from Grow United. He's the founder of Grow United, and he's going to explain to us how they are merging blockchain technology with our food supply, nourishing people, animals, and the planet. Neil, can you please explain to us the mission of your company?
Amazing. Well, you almost got everything correct there. Nourishing the world by harnessing the power of blockchain is what we've actually changed our vision to now,
Okay.
which is pretty much on track. Our mission really is to integrate all the wonderful things that Web3 brings to us in the form of emergent technologies that are going to create some data sovereignty. They're going to create some more trust, transparency, and then traceability for food coming off the farm, so raised or grown, all the way to a consumer's plate, all the way through the value chain. Along the way, we cause positive friction that helps us decentralize the centralized systems that are currently constraining us, both financially and value chain. We do that in a number of different ways. We employ a layer one blockchain that we've built. On top of that, we have a number of different applications. We call them decentralized apps, so dApps for short, that help us really take data. And so a landowner, primarily farmer or rancher, would put their data on the blockchain. They can do three things with it. They can store it because data on the blockchain is stored immutably, meaning it's not going to be tampered with, manipulated. It sits on a ledger and forever is the data, good, bad, ugly, warts and all. You can analyze it because AI works far better with Web3 than it does in Web2. And so we can really create open source mindsets and actually share data to understand deltas and gaps and benefits. And then you can monetize it in numerous different ways. And that's really what the applications are about. So we have Farm Tracer that traces everything from field to fork. We have EcoMint that is our own sandbox to create ecological credits, whether that's carbon sequestration, methane avoidance, biodiversity, water. We have Kohima, which is our on-chain consultancy and advisory firm, because we still love helping landowners, primarily farmers and ranchers, transition to more resilient systems, final state being that regenerative system. And then we have a commerce platform that is really creating a secondary and tertiary market for a lot of our community members that are farmers and ranchers, but it's expanded into a B2B platform as well. So you can nourish your family with nutritious food directly from the source, our farmers and ranchers from the global network that we have. You can also, if you are a farmer and rancher, go on there and start using our decentralized finance mechanism to acquire some of your infrastructure or input needs to farm or ranch. Now, I introduced one final thing there, which is our decentralized finance tool, our Grow token. We firmly believe that decentralized finance is going to be part of everyone's financial portfolio in the near future. We think 5 to 7 years. You're going to have both traditional and decentralized finance. One thing that the Grow platform does extremely well in everything that I've talked about, those applications using DeFi, is really harnessing the tools that Web3, i.e., blockchain, brings to us. And so smart contracts are changing the way that supply chain and producers are functioning together, consumers and supply chain, introduction of the DeFi, and then tokenizing real world assets is the next big wave. And we're doing that at scale. We've led the pace and we're out there tokenizing everything from renewable energies all the way through to water and even a cow. If you would like to own a cow, you can come to our platform and do so. So that's us in a nutshell.
Okay. Um, so how do you match the token to a commodity?
Yeah, so it's not matching the token to a commodity.
Hmm.
Um, you really have to understand, kind of like our traditional finance system, there's a lot of things that go into creating what we call value or liquidity. In the digital finance world, there's different mechanisms. You've got trader coins, which are the meme coins. You've got stable coins, which are backed by, in a lot of cases, the US dollar.
Real
You've
money.
got,
Hmm.
yeah, you've got other stakeable coins that are used for alternative purposes. And then you have what we consider and what we use as is a utility coin. And so the use of it is how it grows its value. And so it's just a trade mechanism. And that attached to real world assets creates liquidity. And you can see that happen in a number of different spots. So if you want to buy a cow through an NFT program on our platform, a tokenized real world asset, you can use the Grow token as a mechanism to own that digital asset. If you want to trade that or sell that, the same thing. On our commerce platform, you can do the same. Or if you're buying or selling ecological credits, it's the same thing. I could also share Grow tokens with you just in the mechanism of selling over the counter those Grow tokens, create liquidity pools. And so there's far greater liquidity opportunities in decentralized finance mechanisms. But really, for me, what it does for the farmers, and that's really where I want to focus um, everything and all our attention, is it helps them decouple from the debt financing programs that are not beneficial to farmers anywhere, but specifically in North America and in the very affluent farming regions.
Hmm. So, excuse me. So help me understand this. I understand that if you have a cow,
Mhm.
it can be tagged the serial number, and you could buy and sell that cow and know exactly which one you're talking about. But how does that work with um, grain, corn, other commodities that are really just sort of fungible? And there's like a silo full of grain. How do I know
Yeah.
which grain I
Well, we
own?
got to change the system, don't we? And that's what we're trying to do. So you can actually trace grain from a field. If we know the field boundaries, we know the seed that went in there. So just like genetics in a vial end up with a steak on a plate, we know seed propagation on field all the way through to terminal and even into processor and even down all the way to call it a bag of flour on the shelf that you're going to purchase as a consumer. You can actually trace all of that today, and there are companies doing that. We're doing that. What
Hmm.
it takes is causing positive friction in the supply chain, meaning that if we're going to change the system, everyone's got to be involved in that change. And so, how do we identify? There's a lot of wonderful AI tracking systems that we embed into software management systems, how we do book and trade for grain at terminals, how we're actually selling containers. There's some other questions that come into play here, like contamination of containers and rail systems at intermodal stations. And so, if that grain has got a higher premium because it's organic or farmed more ethically, does it lose some of that? Yeah, we got to deal with some of those real world problems that us as humans have caused, and we got to fix the system. But being able to trace it from field doesn't really matter what it is: apples, cherries, grains, forages, produce, proteins. We can take that all the way through to consumer plate. Is it hard? Is it something that everyone can do? No, because everyone would be doing it if it was easy. Um, but is it causing the right changes? Absolutely.
Hmm. It's already being done with cannabis. So you have to trace the cannabis from seed to sale um, in Canada, and I think it more or less is probably working because I don't think that there's a huge incentive for people to cheat on it. Um, the excise tax is relatively low. It's 10% or whatever. I don't think it's that very much, like $1 per gram or whatever. Um, but how do you do that with everything else? Like, I'm just looking at your farm tracer, and so you've got a stake with a QR code
Yeah.
on it, so
Yeah.
you know that came from this particular ranch and didn't come from overseas,
That's really just a
hasn't been
consumer and
dicked around with somehow.
yeah.
Mhm.
So the QR coding systems, though they can be used anywhere in the supply chain, typically are more the consumer facing component, and they come with a nice pictorial image. What's on the Web2 wrapped landing page that we have for Farm Tracer that will be updated very shortly, actually, it's in progress, is really just a representation of what that final output can look like. It can be very, very useful for consumers to see the story, the origin story, and some of that high level data. The metadata is really where it gets into the meat or where the rubber hits the road. And that's the supply chain that's using that data when they get challenged for their traceability claims. And a lot of that is on the reporting or maybe even on their GHG component tree, in terms of some of the things they need to trace, or there's an outbreak and, we need to trace back to source of origin. How is it done? Well, to my point, is it easy? No. It means we have to go through every step and every process of that supply chain and understand the management systems that are currently in place, so the software systems that are being used, whether we can tie into those, where the constraint points are. And I literally mean you're on the farm, you put the grain into your bin, and then you offload it through an auger. What auger you're using, is it being monitored and metered? It's going into the truck. Is it a tip truck? Is it going to be siloed out? Is it bottom loader? Is it going on to rail systems? Is it going to terminal? Is it going to independent? Are you trying to get a premium for that? Are you storing it separately or are you mixing it? We go through all these checklists. I'm just talking about grain in particular. We're past the terminal now, and they're selling it into a market space that's going to process it. Well, where is it being ticketed? Where is it being tracked? What shipping systems? What use cases are being monitored right now, and where do we need to bring in new ones? Um, so it's not easy, but can it be done? Absolutely. And has it been done? Yes. We just have
Mm,
to really find the people that want to be pioneers. And that's really what we consider ourselves. We haven't reinvented the wheel by building blockchain. We've just figured out how to use it more effectively and all the tools that come with it. But really, what we're doing is creating a new digital era of pioneers, all the way from field to consumer, so that we can rebuild trust and start correcting some of the unbalanced system that's currently constraining a lot of us.
hmm And so it's kind of like a quality control system. Now, if you were to compare it, say, to being ISO certified, once every 2 years, the notified body comes to your factory or place of business and they audit you.
Mhm.
Is that how you would make sure that people are recording things properly? Because we know the blockchain is um, is permanent and can't be tampered with, but it takes a human being to enter all of that data into the blockchain. And how do I know for sure that along the way somewhere somebody didn't slip in a bunch of Argentinian beef and put a QR code on it and say, "Oh no, it's organic and it's from Canada."
Yeah.
These
I've been
cows were
watching the news today.
massaged every day.
Yeah.
So,
Um, so there's two aspects to that. Humans have proven themselves to be one of the most abundant resources to find the shortest shortcuts possible. And so we take a premise that we believe in people's genuine componentry and in the true nature of humans to try to do good. With that being said, to your point, yeah, there is a checks and balances and audited component. Do we need to get to certified? No. The blockchain really takes care of certification. It's the immutable data that creates the trust and transparency. How it gets there, going through the oracle, going through the verifier, and or auditor, depending on how you verbalize it. Those are the components will always be around, and we're going to need to know those agencies and know who they are, and where they play a role in as simple as recording information from how much seed you're putting in, pounds per acre, all the way through down to bag of flour on the shelf if we're talking about wheat, or grains. I guess it doesn't have to be wheat for flour. And the same is true for anything. And so, yes, there's the checks and balances and the areas of reporting that need to come along with that. Where we can use technology or AI, or a combination of both, to ensure that data, once entered, is being pulled into the cloud and not into the blockchain and not manipulated. That will help streamline things and reduce the due diligence of those auditors, or verifiers. But they're gonna have their role and they're gonna have their place. But I think as we continue to get better and better at using technology, we'll find less and less people trying to cheat the system because we're going to hold people more accountable for the data that's there. Again, it's not just good data. Today, we see a lot of manipulation of data because we can do it. But we start removing those components and people just work with the systems that they're given.
hmm so I'm just wondering, is this going to make food more expensive or less expensive?
This is decentralizing the food. So value of food is going to be relative to the ease of access and really the trust and abundance. And so some of the constraint points are the centralized systems. There's about 10 companies that own all the food brands in the world. And if we start breaking that up, I'm not going to say if it's going to be cheaper or more expensive. It's going to be more accessible and more value add. We hope that in the introduction of creating mechanisms like DeFi that ride alongside TriFi, relative to the access of your nutritious food, that it will be more palatable for everyone, and that's those that are just entering their livelihoods, fledgling out of their parents' homes, all the way up to those of us that have families and in our last chapter of life in terms of accessing quality food that's going to sustain us. And so that question, I think, is sort of a non-question because we got to fix the system first before we can start creating. Is it going to be more expensive or less?
Yeah. Well, my main concern is that a tray of steaks at Costco has gone from about $34 to $84 from before COVID to after COVID. And nobody has come up with an explanation about why. I mean, we know there are carbon taxes that are affecting things like tomato greenhouses or whatever that use up a lot of gas and need heating. But how does that affect the production of meat? Why has meat almost gone up like about 250% in 5 or 6 years? How does that happen,
Yeah.
and why?
So to answer your question effectively, there's two, maybe there's three pillars here that you need to focus on. One, there's the government and policies, and so we need to push back and really start paying attention to some of the creation of the policies that are creating really large constraint points on the cattle industry and the stockmen in general. Two, it would be the supply chain, and so from um, a rancher's outfit all the way through down to steak at Costco, that centralized control system is really a huge bottleneck. We need to decentralize it. We need to break it up, and we need to create more independency. We can't have the same system that's there. We're just going to continue to see people creating numbers, creating inflation that is not necessary. And third, the more that we get thinking about buying directly from source of origin and not having to go through grocer, the better off we're going to be. And so I would say if you're trying to buy meat at Costco right now, go find a farmer's market, go find cows close by. There's a lot of good outfits in your neck of the woods, and start looking to buy directly from ranchers because that's how we're going to start to imbalance the system. And then using tools like the Grow platform is going to give you some of that piece of understanding who those farmers are and some of the data goes into growing your meat. And then you start to get educated. What makes nutritious meat versus non-nutritious meat? What's the difference between high omega-3 ratios and low omega-3 ratios in your meat? Why do you want more marbling or less marbling? These are the questions we need to pay attention to. And so two biggest constraint points would be obviously the government, and the supply chain would be another one because the centralized system for our supply chain is fundamentally broken.
So you think there are people who are price gouging, that it's not some kind of a fundamental cost increase because it's more expensive to raise a cow now than it was 5 years ago?
It, it can be more expensive. It doesn't have to be. If you practice
But it's not
regenerative
five, like, is
farming.
it like 250% more expensive?
No, I would say you could actually farm a ranch with less cost today than you could, 6, 7 years ago, because we understand the mechanisms of farming that much better today, particularly in nature-based solution or what we call regenerative or resilient system ranching. So it doesn't need to be more expensive. Yes, to your question, yes, it's a direct yes. People are manipulating the numbers. They're price gouging. There's reports of that happening all over the place, particularly in meat. You can see that there's some big lawsuits happening just across the border down in the south, um, specifically for that reason.
Okay. Um, and you think it's these industrial sized companies that are controlling the distribution. It's not are the is the money going to the ranchers? Are ranchers getting rich off of this? Where's the money going? Like where's that extra $50 for a tray of steaks going? Who's pocketing the money?
Yeah, government and the centralized supply chain. So in the food supply chain, there's about 10 companies that run all brands. They're profiting. Um, in specifically in the beef side, there's about 4 or 5 large slaughter and distribution. They're profiting. Government agencies are profiting. Does the money flow down to the farm gate? Very, very little of it. And it usually comes through rebates or subsidies as a way to say, hey, we've got your back. But the reality is, it's a huge issue, and there's just a few at the top that are succeeding, and everyone else is suffering.
And what government agencies and how do they profit off of that? I can understand how the middleman just jacks up the price and he's going to make more money, but how does the government agency?
Yeah, I mean everything. I mean, you noted it. There's taxation, and whether you call that environmental taxes, whether you call that scope. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with
No.
scope protocols, but basically it's reporting life cycle analysis from in meat genetics all the way through to steak on the plate. What kind of greenhouse gas and transportation and fuel burn and energy consumption and the list goes on and on that relates to your internal and external uh, call it dependencies to actually move the product through the supply chain, and they call that scope reporting. And so there's agencies that's directly related to the government that are benefiting off of that. ESG being another one, environmental sustainable governance agencies and groups that are um, uh, akin to the government or closely
Hmm.
linked in arm's length away. So those are just
Or
some of
the
the agencies that are
Yeah,
involved
or your prime minister owns a lot of stock in their companies.
potentially. Yeah. You know what? When I get down these rabbit holes, what I say is this continues to underpin why we need blockchain, why we need
Hmm.
centralization, why we need
Hmm.
decentralized finance. We need to start imbalancing the system and causing positive friction. Because talking about all those issues, everyone talks about it all day long. What do we actually do about it? No one knows what to do. Well, we're offering the path and we're offering the levers to actually start to get involved in something that can actually correct, cause a positive friction, correct, and start to decentralize and break up um,
Mm.
the things that are happening. And so that's
So you would right. So you'd be able to see from the blockchain that everything was fine, da 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 da. But until you got to this stage, all of a sudden the
yes,
price doubled,
yeah, absolutely.
and for no apparent reason,
And
right?
in fact, when governments are handing out money to markets or to people, we could have more line of sight. So instead of having these big news announcements like what happened to that $30 million that was doled out that never got spent on the thing it said it was going to be spent on, well, if that was actually traced in a blockchain, we wouldn't have those questions anymore. It we could trace it all the way through from it was issued, who it was issued to, when it was moved, how it was deployed, all the way down. It's basically a ticketing system to final use. This can be said
all
too
yeah,
for
all the way into some MP's spouse's bank account.
well, I
Um,
suppose, or the actual use that it's made for. And so one or the other. Again, I think we can have a scarcity mindset. Which a lot of people do, and certainly the sense I'm getting from you is all those questions that those scarcity mindset people come up with, or we can have an abundance mindset, which is we're going to do something about it, and we're going to fix the system. And yes, it could be used for good. It doesn't have to be used to demonstrate bad. It could actually be used to actually just continue on in a positive direction.
hmm Now, just my guess is not a lot of this is coming from the Saskatchewan government. This is all federal government regulation you're talking about.
Governments in general.
Hmm.
So, you've got your federal, you've got your provincial in Canada, you've got your state in the U.S., you've got your um, rural municipalities in Saskatchewan in particular. Anywhere that you have farming communities, you've got a tiered multitude of government agencies, and they all have different requirements and stipulations and taxes and components of constraint, and they're all constrained. Now, there's good intentioned people there, and to some degree, we need some good policies that are laying out. But I think when it comes to the dollars, there tends to be a lot more biasy to heavyweight on the governmental side than the land
Hmm.
user side.
Okay. So it sounds like whatever the additional incremental cost would be that this would impose on the food system would be easily compensated for by the transparency it would bring, and people would then be able to see for themselves if somebody is price gouging. So I think that would be a good idea, and I think you could also have a law like with the cannabis seed to sale system that just says, yeah, you know what? If you're dishonest and you do something wrong, like you slip in some meat from China or whatever and say that it's from this organic farm in Saskatchewan, you go to jail for 10 years or whatever, or make it 20 years. And then I guess that would keep people honest as well. I have seen reports in the media of some products coming from Europe that were tested and turned out to be horse meat. These are, things that come in a box, like processed meals. So I think there's a lot of concern about that. People are concerned about where their food's coming from, but they can't afford to pay any more than what they're paying already.
I tell you
Yeah.
what, when you start looking at decentralized finance, you're going to find new financial levers on your financial portfolio. When you start seeking out farmers around you and start buying directly from consumers, you start to find you're going to pay way less. And you're going to have
Wow.
healthier food.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what country, anyone that's doing import export, there's people that are trying to cheat the system to make a buck.
Hmm.
And it's partly because of the systems that are broken. So, yes, there's people trying to cheat the system, but maybe they've been forced there. We don't know their story because of the system that is broken, and they found a loophole. It is a concern, but it's a concern whether we're in Canada, whether we're sitting in the UK, whether we're in the US, whether we're in Mexico. Import and export has the same concerns. If you're sitting there and you're getting food, my recommendation is introduce DeFi into your financial portfolio
Hmm.
for seeking farmers and buying direct. Period.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good advice. I think what you're doing is very important. I hope you succeed. Are there other companies doing the same thing you're doing, or because you're the only one I know of?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, blockchain is being around. We haven't reinvented the wheel. We are the largest and only blockchain solely dedicated to the food and agriculture space
Hmm.
that is 100% focused on making sure that we're bringing sovereignty back to the farmers and we're really pushing the boundaries on creating that positive friction, building legacy, and in turn, building trust with consumers on how they access nutritious food. So yes, we are the largest. We're certainly not the only blockchain out there, but certainly the largest solely dedicated to the food and agriculture.
Yeah, well, it sounds fantastic. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights with us, and I really hope you're successful. I'm going to look into your advice of trying to find maybe an alternate supply.
Hmm.
We'll see how successful that is, and I want to thank you again for coming on. It's been very enlightening.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me, Thomas. Been a
Well,
pleasure.
thank you. Bye.
Bye for now.